Welcome to the Dropping into Power podcast, where we'll be hearing stories about the transformational power of surfing from women surfers of all ages, all levels, and all over. We'll hear about courage, commitment, struggles, frustration, epiphany, and, of course, life transformations large and small. I'm your host, Sheila Gallion, and I am stoked to share these conversations with these amazing women full of so much passion with all of you. Hi, just a super quick plug. This episode was recorded on August 3rd. I did not think that I'd have it out in time for Mindy's book signing on August 5th, but I did. So if you're hearing this on August 4th and you're in Honolulu or on the island of Oahu or any of the islands that you can get to her book signing on Saturday, listen up to the details in the very beginning of the episode. Thank you. Aloha and welcome to the Dropping into Power podcast. I'm so excited to be here with Mindy Pennybacker. And I just realized I've been in a flurry of writers. So my last two guests have been writers, amazing writers. And now we're getting Mindy Pennybacker, who has come up with the most beautiful, exquisite book, Surfing Sisterhood Hawaii, which we're going to talk a lot about. I wish I could show the title. I'll put it when I post on Instagram. But I first learned about Penny as I learned about almost everyone through Dr. Stephanie Hahn, who is a great connector, and happened to see the book, bought the book, loved the book, amazing book. And then Penny herself is just incredible. So I'm going to give her intro in a minute. I want to do a quick little bit of housekeeping because I always forget to do this, which is if you love the podcast, please go and give it a 5-star rating. I always forget to ask for that, but I'm told by the people that know these things that it really helps other people find the podcast once you have more of those ratings. So thank you in advance for all of that. And now I'm going to read a little bit of the bio of Penny, who is, just a hugely accomplished human being and adorable. She's making this funny face, but okay. Honolulu native Mindy Pennybacker is a surf columnist for the Honolulu. I didn't even know you could be a surf columnist. So a surf columnist for the Honolulu Star-Advertiser and a former editor-in-chief of Honolulu Weekly and the Green Guide and an award-winning national environmental newsletter. We haven't even talked about the environmental stuff. The author of Do One Green Thing from HarperCollins in 2010, her writing has appeared in the Atlantic, Surfers Journal, The Nation, The New York Times, Bamboo Ridge, Glamour, Martha Stewart's Whole Living, and The Village Voice. Oh my God. Her fiction writing has received a National Endowment for the Arts Fellowship and Wallace Stegner, Joseph Henry Jackson, and James Michener Awards. A graduate of Punahou School, Stanford University, the University of Iowa Writers Workshop, and the University of California at Davis, Martin Luther King School of Law. Mindy learned community engagement from her grandparents, Lawrence and Mary King, who owned and produced Halm's Kimchi for more than 30 years, and her mother, Dolly King Lott, who taught piano, founded Rainbow Peace Fund, and served on the State of Hawaii Martin Luther King Jr. Commission. I am so tired. It's an unbelievable pedigree. Mindy lives on Oahu and Belle Isle and Mer, France, which I didn't know until I read this, with her husband, Don Wallace, author of The French House, Sourcebooks 2014, contributing editor at Honolulu Magazine and co-founder of the Hawaii Review of Books. In their free time, they enjoy riding waves and consuming local foods on both islands with Rory and Caitlin Wallace, and I'm guessing those are progeny of some kind. All right. Well, can I just read this sentence over again? The Atlantic, Surfers Journal, The Nation, The New York Times, and then we'll jump down to Punahou, Stanford, University of Iowa Writers Workshop, which anybody who's a writer knows how incredibly hard it is to get into that. So anyways, very impressive, but not as impressive as your surf mission. So, and I want to hear all about your story. I just want to say hello.
Hey,
Hi.
Sheila, so good to see you and hear you again.
So we had such a nice chat. Mindy was in the mountains. And so literally her book has just dropped, Surfing Sisterhood Hawaii. And she's been doing book signings all throughout Oahu. Do you have more plans throughout the other islands or on the mainland?
Not yet. my last probably in-person event of the summer is this Saturday, August 5th, at Nā Mea Hawaii and Native Books in Honolulu. So they're linked. Native Books, Nā Mea Hawaii is one of the cultural cornerstones of Hawaii. Miley Meyer founded the business, I guess, 30, 40 years ago, and has really been instrumental in translating and republishing Hawaiian language classics in translation.
Wow.
And she's just a repository and welcoming spirit for new local writers or writers, anybody who comes through Hawaii. So I'm really just thrilled to be invited there. And we're going to have a talk. Well, there's going to be a signing like Saturday morning at Nā Mea's Ward Center store. And then in the afternoon from 2:30 to 4, a book party with a talk story with 3 of the women featured in my book. And as you know, Sheila, the book covers women of all ages. So this is maybe a 20-year-old University of Hawaii student, May Kamaka, and then Sydney Iokea, Kamehameha School alumna. I'm not going to give anyone's age, but who's older. And one of the queens of, literally the woman who founded the Queen of the Bay, all-woman Waimea Bay surf meet, Bonsai Betty DiPolito. So they're from 3 different generations.
It's women of all ages. It's women of all walks. There's a focus on Native Hawaiian culture and calling out the history of Native Hawaiian surfing, which is so important. And I have a lot of questions for you about that we want to focus on. I'm going to actually start with this amazing quote that you pulled, because you did so much research on the history of surfing, which was so delightful. Was that you? Did you publish an article?
Yeah, I do publish regular articles. And I think I had an article on women big wave surfing.
No, it wasn't that. It was similar. It had that same image that you have in the book. That's like the lithograph. So that's okay. I just was curious if it was the same.
I did do that article.
Oh,
It was about Princess Kaiulani's surfboard.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, because there was a show at the Bishop Museum when Carissa Moore they're having an exhibit of Carissa Moore's surfboard and Duke Kahanamoku's surfboard. And there was they were screening the Duke movie.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And so I wrote something up about that.
Oh, okay. All right.
Traditionally, women had surfed, and Carissa was, part of the most recent in a long line of Kanaka Maoli surfers who made a worldwide ripple like Duke Kahanamoku.
It's so amazing. And so this is one of my most delicious quotes. And then I want to, I have a sort of specific question. So it says in this chapter, and this is from 1836, written by some guy. Sorry, Theodore. I didn't take real note of his name. I'm sure he did a great job, but it's the quote that kills me. The entire female population of Kealakekua plunged entirely naked into the waves atop 6 to 8 foot long pointed boards and rode upon the foaming crest of the surges. I am just so alive with this image of women, the entire female population, running naked into the waves and jumping on their surfboards. Can we do that, please? I want us to it's so awesome. So the image just really touched me, the power of it, the metaphor of all of it. And I was just curious, as you did your research, give us a little recap of the history of women's surfing and the images and moments that really stand out for you.
Well, Sheila, I think you just picked a perfect image. I mean, talk about a surfing sisterhood that all these women just all carefree, just stormed out to sea.
Yes.
And the Frenchman, Theodore, I'm trying to find his name. He was totally blown away.
It was Theodore Adolphe Barrault.
Yeah, this passage I was amazed. I haven't seen these passages. And I really didn't know until I started writing this book that women had surfed as equals with men, and even had surfed better and in more celebrated ways than men. going back through traditional Hawaiian history. But Pele and her sister Hi'iaka, they were among the original goddesses who came from Tahiti, along with the Polynesian people who settled the Hawaiian Islands in maybe 1000 AD, or the goddesses may have come earlier. They both surfed, even though Pele was the goddess of fire. Hi'iaka was the goddess of the hula, and she was a really proficient surfer. Like when she wanted to, she was sent to rescue one of Pele's boyfriends. And she said, well, what would you like to do? And he said, I want to go surfing. So she took him surfing and they fell in love. Pele got it. I mean, they're really probably the most famous surfers, except for Maui, the demigod in Hawaiian legend. But there were also surfers like Mamala, she was a shark, a kind of mo'o. So she was part, mo'o, the dragons, the kind of sea dragons who came from Tahiti and are still reputed to live like in the caves of Makua Valley and all the ancestral places in the islands. So she came, and her territory was K-O-U, Honolulu Harbor, along the South Shore. And she lived with, her husband was the shark god Uha, but she was coveted by another great god of, Honolulu, who actually stole her away because she was so celebrated for her surfing. She liked to surf the really big South swells that close out the whole South Shore. That's when she went out, and there were all these women. I mean, but what I didn't even know was that in Hawaiian history, because when I was growing up here, it was just an elective, and it probably still is. We didn't learn any Hawaiian history. So the whole time I was going to public school as a little kid, learning to surf on the South Shore, we had no Hawaiian history. And when I went on to Punahou in high school, you got rewarded for taking European history because it was an AP course, but Hawaiian history, I had no time in my ambitious schedule for it. So I never learned anything, much less that Queen Ka'ahumanu, the wife of King Kamehameha, surfed with him. They both surfed at radical places off Kohala on the Big Island. And people were in awe.
It's a terrifying spot. It's Lighthouse they're talking about, right? Queen Kahumanu.
Yeah.
I mean, that is like, I interviewed my guest Mackenzie earlier this year, who was bitten by a shark there. So, yeah, yeah, she's okay. But I mean, it's not really about the shark. It's a really gnarly wave. So and it only breaks when it's really big. So yeah, that's quite an image. Yeah, I didn't know that either. And of course I didn't grow up in Hawaii, but there is Hawaiian history taught. Now it's a requirement. They don't talk about surfing.
Because your daughter is in high school, right? Or just she's
in high school. I think she's actually taking Hawaiian history next year. She'll be a senior. She took some earlier throughout. There's been like a little bit. And she goes to a weird charter school. That's a place. It's an amazing school, but it's a place they need to put a little more focus. For sure. But even in the Hawaiian history, because she took some of it at Kealakahe briefly, they're not focusing on surfing. And it's such an important part of the culture. The movie about Eddie Akau that came out, I think last year, was really incredible and really touches on it. And then now there's Surf Girls of Hawaii. Is that the Surf Girls of Hawaii that just came out on Amazon that Reese Witherspoon did? That was really neat. In fact, there's a quote, Moana Jones-Wong, who is this, incredible pipe surfer, this female pipe surfer. And then her husband, they interview her husband, who talks about like, the first time he saw her, he said, the first time I saw her, she was pulling into this sick barrel at pipe and it was love at first sight. So when you were talking about the women surfers, I was thinking about that, or about the goddess who was kidnapped for her surfing. Yeah, it's powerful. It's sexy. It's hot. And that actually demeans it. It's not sexy. It's powerful. So it's a different kind of allure, and it's mythical.
Well, that's the kind of guy you want, is like Moana Jones's husband, a guy who falls in love with you because you're a really great, brave surfer. Kalehua vehe means losing the lehua lei. So another myth that I learned was there was this really handsome man who was surfing out there off Waikiki or by Diamond Head in the place where commoners have to go. And then there was an ali'i break, but all breaks were, unisex. So a woman at the ali'i break saw him and thought he was cute. So she paddled over, and he was wearing these lehua lei, ohia lehua, and they just had this repartee. She was like, oh, that lei would look nice on me. And he would said, what lei are you talking about? And then finally he took them off and gave the lei to her. So he lost his lei, but then they became lovers.
I
And
love it.
there's like so many, like Kelia, the god, she was a chiefess of Maui. She was kidnapped by the king of Oahu, of inland Oahu, because of her surfing prowess and her beauty. He sent men in a canoe who kidnapped her to Oahu, and he kept her in his inland mountain fastness, where she had 4 children with him and could never get to the ocean. Finally, she escaped. Well, with his permission, went down to Ewa and kept walking all the way to Waikiki, where she borrowed a surfboard, went surfing, and then the chief of Waikiki fell in love with her and they got married. Then she was really happy. So, there was a lot of admiration for women surfers. It was considered a great thing. And to me, all we ever heard about Hawaiian history was that women, because of the kapu, we were inferior citizens. We couldn't eat with men. We were kept separate from men in every way. We had inferior foods, but we had the right to surf as equals with men. And as you know, surfing was so valued by the culture that when the surf was good, everyone left their jobs, left the fields, and rushed out to sea, men, women, and children. So those were the values. And it's shocking to hear they're not teaching surfing in Hawaiian history because it was so integral to the society. And as women have told me about, as I interviewed them for the book, surfing and the sexual politics in the lineup are totally emblematic, a microcosm of life on shore. Because somewhere along the line, obviously in Hawaii and everywhere else, men got the upper hand and they're fighting to keep it. And really, I think now the surfing is one of the least romantic spots on earth. It's just like gender war.
That's so true. I know you have there's a story I can't wait to get to about that. Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. And it's not always, and it's not constant, and it's not everywhere, but there is an underlying piece, and especially in certain places, that it is so aggressive. It's so just the assumption. And every woman, no matter what caliber, has experienced the obvious summation of some inferior male surfer that just looks at you and because you're female thinks you can't surf and drops in on you. Every single woman has experienced that. Now, the guys, I do have guy friends too that, they have their own problems if they're not a great surfer. They have their own issues. They get dropped in on and dogged and all kinds of stuff, but not just because they exist in their bodies. It's not, it has to do with their skill level. Whereas, we certainly encounter it without anyone assessing our skill level. So as you've been meeting, and I've seen on your Instagram so many amazing women that you've talked to and met with, and you mentioned Carissa Moore's foundation that is promoting, I think you said, the values of Hawaiian surfing. So, empowering women, but also empowering them through the lens of Hawaiian surfing. What has been your response for having put out this book? Are you getting a lot of support? Are people, wanting to bring you in and talk more about it? What's happening?
There's been really good support. I mean, it was really exciting to have 3 book events in California.
Mm.
And I had my kickoff event was here at Chaminade University. And a lot of the women in the book came and told their stories, told about like being, men trying to put the moves on them in the surf, men insulting and intimidating them in the surf. It was kind of like a great encounter session. And the same carried through in Southern California, where I spoke and had book signings, the Huntington Beach Surf Museum, at this incredible store called Girl in the Curl, Dana Point, and then at the California History Surfing Museum in Oceanside. Then there was a talk here at Dust Shop Bookstore in Honolulu. And women have just really wanted to speak out, women of all generations. There's been interesting dynamics because our perceptions are so different than men's. At Oceanside, a young woman came with her dad, and he said, I'm sorry to hear it's that way in Hawaii, but here in Oceanside anyway, everyone's so nice. Everyone surfs at equals. There's no cutting out women, no pressuring of women. And his daughter said, yeah, that's my dad's point of view. My experience is completely different.
Wow. So even, so there's a whole group of men who don't even know it. Oh my gosh, I have to ask you, have you seen the Barbie movie?
Yes, I have. Exactly.
Right? It's just this perception that it's just a different perception, right? Oh my gosh. Well, I think it's, and as more and more women come to the surface, it's been so interesting watching what's happened over the last 20 years, and especially in the last 5 years. And I see like, okay, there's community of women, but then there's also competition of women. We've talked about all of that stuff when it comes. You had a really good point when we chatted before. You said, well, of course it's natural to be competitive with people close to your level. So it's an interesting balance. And you talk about, women. This is I'm going to step back a little broader because you make a comment in the book that women's lives are balancing acts very similar to surfing. Yeah. And I guess what I'm curious is, are you seeing any more of a balance? Is all of this expression, do you think, all of this ability to talk it out and see each other and be with each other, do you think it's having an effect on psyches? And I don't mean just around your book, but just even as this conversation has bubbled up, are we treating ourselves any better in the water? Are we kinder to ourselves at all? Or what's your observation?
Well, you brought up Carissa Moore's Moore Aloha, and the whole mission of that nonprofit group is not only to empower girls, but to make them proud of who they are and to love themselves as they are. Carissa has undergone so much self-pressure for how she looks. It's difficult for women who don't look the classic surfing California way, like thin with long blonde hair, right? And how are you going to crank power turns and get barreled in massive waves with that kind of frame? It's like, well, maybe you can. I mean, Stephanie Gilmore, but then other people are just born with more muscular bodies. So she's trying to teach girls not to worry, not to use the male gaze, and just to be proud of who they are. And so this is an ongoing dialogue. They talk all the time, and they do all kinds of different trust exercises, camping. They do like working in the lo'i, they do artwork, and they surf with women of all ages. Wow. So that's so necessary. And I'm really feeling that burgeoning. Carissa is like one of many who are doing this, but she's doing it in an organized and generous way.
Yeah.
Then there's the Surfing Moms, a group that I mentioned in the book, where they're trading off surfing. They trade off babysitting so they can watch other kids on the beach while they surf. And the president of Surfing Moms, Elizabeth Maiden, said, I just go out. I'm so grateful to get out whenever I can. It doesn't matter how the waves are. I just need that water time. But being part of Surfing Moms and meeting other women, now I know more women when I go surfing. And that's made an enormous difference. And I myself, I was always kind of withdrawn because, as you know, I mean, I left Hawaii at 17 to go to college on the mainland. And then I went to grad school, worked in New York, finally moved home, only surfed incrementally on vacations in between. And suddenly here I was back in my home break, but feeling like a total outsider and alien. And there were other women surfers, they were much better. And they were like, I think, horrified by me. And, but gradually, they give me little tips like, maybe you should like paddle harder. Just, they seemed to care. And we became fast friends. And then gradually through this book, I met more and more women. And even in the year, it took me a year and a half, it took me to research and write the book. I feel so much more comfortable and happy when I surf because there are friends. The reason I was kind of a loner, even as a child, was that I used to be the only girl out surfing.
Yeah.
And
Tell that story of how you started. Because it's of a time and of a place, and it's a really interesting story to me. Just, how you started, and then you're the paper boy and getting permission from your grandfather, like all of this stuff, and the perception of what it was like to send a girl out into the water at that time. So yeah, tell us the evolution of your water womanness.
well, you don't forget anything. Yeah, that part's not in the book. But I really, really wanted to learn to surf because we lived, and I still live 3 blocks from the beach off Diamond Head. Although in what used to be a blue collar neighborhood, believe it or not. And my grandfather loved the ocean. He was born and raised in Hawaii, and he would take us kids down all the time. So I loved the ocean and I felt at home in it. I mean, he put me in the water like when I was 8 months old for the first time. But he refused to let me surf because he said, surfing, like, look at those guys, they're like rough boys and they don't study. I can tell they don't care. You got to be a good student, use your brain. And I was so depressed. But then finally, our paper boy saw me at the beach. Oh, I didn't know he's a paper boy, but he said, well, I'll teach you to surf. And I said, well, okay, but my grandfather won't let me. He goes, oh, I know Mr. Kang. I'm the paper boy. Tell him Donnie Mailer, the paper boy, will teach you. So I thought, sure. I said, okay, Grandpa, Donnie Mailer, the paper boy, will teach me. He said, okay, he's a good boy. So then Donnie and another boy, Tommy Winkler, who they were both state junior champions at one point or another in the late 60s. They took me out and it was all boys. It was Hawaiian boys, Haole, Asian, mixed like me, Papa like me. And they trained me. But in between, when they weren't around me, other boys would kind of give me hostile looks. And they had to do the surf, we were called the Tongs gang. The boys had to do the wing formation for me to even get away when it was crowded.
Wow.
Because surfing was booming in the late 1960s. Oh, wow. And it has to stop booming. Yeah. So that's how I kind of just never felt really at home and always watched my back. Also, surfing back in the 60s and 70s, like when they used to have those expression sessions, which were really cool, like at Pipeline with Jerry Lopez, when they decided they didn't want to compete for a prize or a trophy. They just wanted to have a contest where everyone's free surfed. And I felt that was what I wanted to be, a free surfer. Naturally, it's competitive, but I didn't want to just be in a slot.
Right. So how old were you at that point when you started?
I think I was like 13 or 14.
And then how long was it till you had another girl in the water?
Well, I would start bringing girls from school. We had some spare longboards that family friends had given us. So I dragged them out with me because they all wanted to meet boys.
Oh, there you go. Right.
And they were usually on the swim team or water polo team. So they came along, but they didn't really stick with it until finally I met a girl, Keani Reiner, one of my classmates, who actually was one of the first two women to sail on the Hokulea.
Oh,
She's
wow.
back from Tahiti. And she was my big surf bud for ages. Such a relief.
So it's basically you and her and a bunch of guys.
Yeah.
And
And then sometimes, as you know, I'd see like a couple of slightly younger girls, Heidi Hemmings and Evelyn Black. Evelyn became a national champion. They would be surfing out with Rabbit Kikai, the renowned beach boy
yeah.
from Waikiki, who was a protege of Duke Kahanamoku. And Rabbit was Hawaiian, and he, in addition to teaching these two girls and coaching them, would just help me out, whenever he saw me, teach me etiquette, tell the boys, oh, it's Mindy's turn now. He was like a traffic cop out there with a bunch of tweens and teens. I'm forever
Oh
grateful
gosh,
for
that sounds so good. And
Yeah.
you talked about him teaching teaching etiquette. And remember you saying something like, that they were actually very forgiving as long as you followed the etiquette, and that the etiquette really came in line with Hawaiian values. So can you speak to that a little bit more, how the etiquette lines up with Hawaiian values?
The etiquette, I guess, is just that the ocean is a commons in Old Hawaii. No one owned any part of the ocean. Of course, certain quadrants for fishing and surfing were staked out for ali'i, certain quadrants for commoners. But they could interrelate in their sectors if by invitation. I guess that's basically the waves for the Hawaiians were a resource that was naturally shared, just as food was. Everyone had their role, and your role in the waves was to, surf well, surf flashily, have fun, but not be a giant hog, because the system was Hawaiian tradition was so interrelated. Everyone had to pull for the common good.
Mm.
From the forest down to the ocean, through the agricultural crops, through the fishing.
That's really interesting that there's some concept of, and it would be hard to recognize in most of the lineups here. Although, to be honest, here in Kona, there's definitely Native Hawaiians that surf, but it isn't as if it's primarily, I mean, it's, at all. So it has not, for sure you might have local Hali, you might have people that have grown up here and, may have some of that spirit too. But I think it's turned a little bit more into, I don't know, that just whole concept. There's no one sort of there's no uncles and aunties kind of bringing that through. And we talked about, so I'll jump to this idea you had, because I do want to get into the conflict. So with the lack of that, and then the Eddie Cow movie really, really highlights what happened right as Hawaiians were sort of reclaiming their place in the water. And then there was an influx of Californians and Australians that came in and just so disrespectfully, just aggressively, attacked the waves. And it's complex, like in some of them, they hadn't surfed before. So, but that sense of loss of place and loss of self, which activated this hostility, that can still come through to this day. And I think and now without there being somebody with this grace and wisdom and strength to kind of explain how it's supposed to be, everyone's a little lost. That's why I think it's important to talk about it. Like, how do we bring this back to, there's always going to be a pecking order. The best surfer is going to get what they get. There's going to be, some of that is just going to be natural. But this idea that there can be something different going on, but we're not there yet. So I want to ask you the story. It's my favorite story that we talked about before. And I don't know if this is in the book, but you called it your librarian rant, but we're going to get to that in a second. But you mentioned that there were at the breaks that you surf, that you've isolated 3 kinds of invaders: the hotshots, the visitors and recent transplants, and then the groms. But I love how you kind of talked about this. So, how do you deal? Like, how are you and your friends dealing with these different groups?
Well, the hotshots, the vainglorious surfers, many of them local surfers, Hawaiian or otherwise, are just the guys who take wave after wave. And that's totally in breach of traditional Hawaiian etiquette as taught by Rabbit Kakai or George Downing or anybody else I knew. So I've tried to talk with them and actually been almost beaten up.
Wow.
So,
wow.
I mean, so there was this one guy, he's not actually from Hawaii. I think he's from Tahiti or something. He'll come out and just take wave after wave. And I finally told him, you don't have to take every single wave. And he just went crazy attacking me. He said, "Oh yeah, well, you're a terrible surfer. You have no right to any waves. I've watched you. You really suck. You don't know what you're doing." And as a woman and girl, I internalized this. I always think he's right.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God, I'm so humiliated. But then I realized, no, he's attacking me because he feels defensive. So I actually called him out on his rude behavior where he's making everyone miserable, guys and girls alike. And so then but he kept paddling up to me. He's a really muscular, big guy and shouting. And then I just paddled up to a guy I knew and I said, "Hey, this man, I just want to sit by you so this man doesn't attack me." And he said, "Yeah, please do. This man, if you weren't here, he'd be yelling at me, but he's all in control and he's just a total hog." Then this kind of man will be very cowardly when another guy comes out who surfs better, as you pointed out, and makes him back off. And it's just like a carousel, it's just like goes around and round. So what we've learned, the girls and I out at Sui's, my local break, is like we just laugh and they can't stand that. We're like, goes again. Wow.
I love that.
And yeah, because we'll be surrounded by guys. I mean, on a good day, there's maybe 4 or 5, even 6 women, but they're 24 guys.
Wow.
Really, the International Surfing Association estimate of 4 men to every woman is pretty much accurate.
Yeah.
Except, in Hawaii, on Oahu's South Shore, it's often 10 to 1, 10 guys to 1 woman. So they don't like laughter. They don't like it when girls sit together and talk. And so we do that. And just having a few of us together really helps. Then with the ones who aren't from here, that's really, I guess that's my librarian comeback. Yeah. So they have no clue whatsoever. And there's this one guy who was like, he was white. I don't know where he's from. And he's kind of built like, I don't know, like sort of like a wild boar, kind of all chest and then really long hair, all in like fake dreads. And he decided he didn't like me. I think because, I am naturally kind of, I guess, assertive because I know the lineup really well. And people tend to follow me around because they know that where I am, the wave will come. And so I try to, get away from them and get into position. He decided he just hated me. And again, he started really trying to intimidate me. He paddled for every wave I was going for. And I don't want any collisions or confrontations. I'm very scared because I've been hit before by boards. And then he would claim that I was trying to drop in on him and steal his waves when it was the opposite. So it was gaslighting, kind of like the other guy, right?
Wow.
And then he'd be taking a wave, and I knew he was going left, so I'd paddle inside to let him go, and he'd paddle towards me, the point of his board. And he even ran over our boogie boarder, our mascot, Boogie Pete, who's the kindest man on earth, and ruined his boogie board. I mean, this guy's just out of control.
Wow.
So he kept insulting me, nagging me, following me, telling other men, she's picking on me. It was insane.
Wow.
Finally, this other woman said, just be quiet. She's not she's surfing well, and what's wrong with you? You got it all backwards. And he started shouting at her. They almost came to blows. He kept picking. I said, look, it's okay. Thank you for speaking up for me, but I don't want you to get hurt. And then another tiny girl was telling him, leave her alone, leave us alone. So I actually took a wave, and he followed me in, and he was screaming at me and just like screaming obscenities. And I finally just said, listen, Buster, just button it up, button your lip, Buster. That's enough. And he looked so shocked. He just stopped. I didn't use any crude words, but it was probably my tone. I was just at the end of my wits. And I felt like Madame Librarian in The Music Man.
Oh, no, it's just so great. You listen up, Buster. I'm going to give you a piece of my mind, you whippersnapper.
He was terrified.
I just think there's something really powerful about that kind of comeback, just to totally, just like laughing or whatever, just like taking them aback, because they just don't. It takes it to this whole other place. They're just like, who am I talking to? Like, is this some weird sorceress, sorceress?
Exactly.
Mother figure? I don't know what's happening. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and then the groms, we were like invaded by groms several summers straight. And I remember they would just paddle, paddle, paddle for every single wave. And finally, the most sentient looking grom, I said, I'm a human being. I exist. You can't just paddle in front of me or paddle over me, because I'm alive too. And he's like, oh. And then I said, what's your name? And he said, Dakota. And I said, well, I'm Mindy. And after that, he kind of was awakened until finally it was my birthday. And I came out, and he was with his pack of groms. And everyone, these groms, they're driving people crazy. Like all the male surfers say, there's been some kind of hatch. Why are we just being flooded by groms? They're everywhere like monkeys. And I said, look, it's my birthday, so I thought maybe you'd give me a wave. Well, how old are you? And I said, I'm 1,000 years old. To his fellow groms, okay, look, it's Mindy's birthday, so we're going to let her go on waves. Kind of looked really mad, but they let me go, and soon they were all cheering me.
Oh,
it reminded me of the Tongs gang of boys, like 40, 50 years ago.
That's the best story ever.
We've been friends ever since. I mean, he's really one of the people who looks out for me. And in fact, when that like wild boar guy was picking on me, he wanted to go punch him, but I wouldn't let him, I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Very
That's such a sweet and interesting story. Just, literally by declaring your humanity and being human. And I do think with the groms, especially the boys, they just don't see you. And I remember reading about teenage boys, like, and a lot of them are younger than teenage boys. There was a scientist who had studied this. Like, they literally will just walk over furniture and trip over it. They'll just walk over it. Like, they just don't see stuff. So I do think there's something kind of innocent about it. They're not mentally calculating. But at the same time, somebody has to explain to them that they're not alone on the planet, So,
yeah, exactly.
And you did it in such a funny way. And I love that they started cheering you. It reminds me just randomly, I think I've even told this story one time before, but some months ago, I was out where I always surf. And then these were young men. They were not groms. They came, and they were definitely local, but they were, I think, from Hilo. Because I didn't recognize them. And then suddenly this pack of them, there were like 6 of them, and they were really good. Like, they just ripped. But somehow, for some reason, the waves kept coming to me too. So I'd be sitting like right in the middle of them. And I would go with my wave. Like, it was shocking. I have no idea how it was my wave. It just was. And nobody fight me for it. It was just weird. And then because I got a couple waves, I was able to just appreciate how amazing they were. And then I said, to one of the guys, I'm like, where are you from? They're like, we're from here. I'm like, well, I know you're from here, but, like, because they're Hawaiian, but I'm like, where are you from? And I'm like, God, you guys are a blast. Like, you're just ripping. And then he was like, every time I saw him after that, he's like, hi, auntie, like, just breaking that energy of it being competitive. Like, they were, so I'm not sure if I would have appreciated them quite as much if I wasn't always getting waves, but they also had such a good energy about them. Like they were having so much fun and they weren't being super hoggy. They just were such good surfers that they could take off on anything. So it was kind of peaky. But yeah, I don't know, it doesn't always happen but that humanity, maybe piece by piece, moment by moment, we make some inroads and you make some friends. And because there's nothing better than having somebody, especially when you get that bomb wave and you don't, maybe not out with your closest friends, but somebody who knows you goes, it's just like, it's just so great to be witnessed. It's so huge. Oh my gosh.
To have feedback and encouragement and celebration.
Yeah, I love it. So your background is, the peoples of Hawaii are so interesting. And I can't remember if I told you this when we were talking, because I know that was it your Korean grandparents that came over to pick sugarcane?
It was my great-grandparents.
Your great-grandparents.
One couple originally came to work in the cane fields on the Big Island at Hawaii, and the other couple came to Oahu to work in the pineapple fields.
And both from Korea?
Yeah, one set was from North Korea and one set was from South Korea.
Oh, wow. North Korea from back in the day.
Yeah.
Because my great-grandparents came on the Heliopolis from Spain too. Although it's weird, the Spaniards didn't stay. The Spaniards all left the islands. Everybody else stayed. So I don't know why the Portuguese stayed, the Koreans stayed, the Japanese stayed, the Chinese stayed, everybody stayed. But the Spaniards, partly what happened is somebody made it to California and the climate was so similar to where they had left Hawaiian and these different areas, Malaga, Spain. It just sort of started this, migration. And then apparently the Spaniards worked underneath the Portuguese. The Portuguese were the Lunas over the Spaniards. And so that didn't work out really great. And then a lot of them were illiterate, so didn't understand that they'd gotten land grants. Like they didn't even understand, many of them, their contracts, that they actually were being given land if they had stayed. So, yeah, it was interesting. But so your history going up, so you were Korean. I think you said your dad was European. And what was that like in that time?
In the 60s, it was interesting because, as you said, Sheila, there was an influx of Californians and Australians, and the Californians, even though Hawaii had become a state in 1959, even until quite recently, you would run into Americans who somehow didn't realize, probably until Obama became president. And then there was that whole controversy about, but he was born and raised here. Then they sort of realized, Hawaii is actually part of the United States.
Yeah.
So they'll be out surfing. And although I'm half Korean and half my dad's from New Jersey, I can get pretty dark, and in those days we didn't use sunblock. So Californians would think I was Hawaiian. And I remember one guy was just pursuing me around the lineup. And usually if you gave them a stink eye and the cold shoulder, they'd leave you alone. But there were so few young girls to bother. And this was a full-grown man. It was really creepy.
Ew.
Following me around trying to talk to me. And I finally said, would you please just go away and leave me alone? He's like, you speak such perfect English. And I realized, we are just natives. We are native to them. We are the colonized. I mean,
my God.
I was studying feminist studies early on, even in high school, and I was studying Marxist politics, and I just felt like, wow, this is terrible,
Wow. I love that you said that to him. Like, that's incredible. But
I was very at a certain point when I was a good surfer before I moved to the mainland. I was very proud, very outspoken, very, territorial, like any local surfer. I mean, true, I was a better surfer than him, which wasn't too difficult since he was a complete novice idiot from.
Oh, God. I didn't even think about that.
It was more that he was sexually he was a predator, he was really bothering me and kind of breathing heavily and
Ew.
trying to saddle up to me. So I had to yell at him. But I also had confrontations with local guys. Like, I don't know if I told you about Reno Avalera.
Mm-mm.
Well, he was a famous surfer, like at the end of the 60s. He was a contemporary of Jerry Lopez, one of the classic lads of Ala Moana Bowls, very agile, state champion, Waimea Bay, everything.
Mm-hmm.
And when these celebrated surfers would come to our neighborhood, the boys would be all excited, like, a celebrity was visiting. And so we were out at Rice Bowls, which is one of the deep blue water breaks on the South Shore. It only breaks when other breaks close out.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was with the boys, and they're like, okay, Mindy, go. And I was in the right spot. I went on a like maybe 8-foot wave Hawaiian. And then in front of me, I see Reno Abalero dropping in. And it was like a big hollow room of a wave at Rice Bowls. And I was shouting, get out of my way, get out. And he just planted himself in front of me. I went right up to the tail of his board. I'm like, this wave is going to break and kill me. And he kind of looked over his shoulder, and he went a little faster. I followed him through the wave. We came out. And I said, what were you doing? That was my wave. How dare you? And I said, why did you drop in on my wave? You dropped in like halfway down the wall. And he said, well, I didn't think you was going to make it. He nearly killed me.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Explain 8-foot Hawaiian, first of all, just for anyone that doesn't know.
So Hawaiian measure is taken from the back of the wave. So it'd be 8 foot from the back of the wave. So the actual face, because Hawaiian waves are convex, they go beneath the surface in front. It's probably like from, maybe a 14, 15-foot face.
Right.
And Rice Bowls it's a very powerful wave, because it gets to that size and it's hollow.
That's crazy. That's crazy. Thank God you're okay.
I mean, I just realized, I'm with a bunch of boys. He knows they're local to the neighborhood. I'm with them. They're telling me to go, and he still goes. Basically, I knew he wanted to insult me and take me down.
Yeah.
Because he felt like it, because he was mean. And as you said earlier, they look at us and they think we can't surf just because we're a girl.
Yeah. And I've had that happen, and I will never be a good surfer. I mean, it's by anybody's standards. No, you're so kind. I have 2 good pictures, but no, I have some videos that would make you cry. But we know who we're talking, like, the really accomplished and can take off and everything. But if you're mostly going to make the wave, that deserves a wave. You deserve your spot if you're going to make a wave. And I had this happen at Malibu in my first or second year of surfing, where this kid I went, and I used to make it. Couldn't do much on the wave, but I made waves, and I was fearless. I could make it. I would go, and I'm going to make it, at least down the line. And this kid just looks right at me and goes. Mm-hmm. And so I paddled up to him. I just followed him. And I was like, hey, we're going to be friends, and you're not going to do that again. And he's like, well, where I come from, we drop in on chicks and old guys. And I was well, you're not going to drop in on me. And he didn't, but that was literally the creed. Where I come from, we drop in on chicks and old guys. So he said that out loud. And there's some really good women surfers in Southern California. So I'm not counting myself here. there were some really good surfers. So as long as they had never seen women who could surf, Yeah, it's a weird one. And it's a constant, it is a constant. And as I talk to women on this podcast, and especially women starting later in life, it really gets in their heads, Like I love in your book that you say in here, a woman's place is in the waves. And I have a quote that I've said to some of my friends, and I'll say on the podcast, you belong in the water, you belong. It is really hard for us to, acknowledge that sometimes, that because that's how we feel. You internalize it when somebody criticizes you, or, you know, like guys will make jokes about how you surf. Like that's where it comes to for us, is we don't even deserve to be there. And I don't think that's the experience for the men. They may have other experiences. I don't know what they are, but I don't think it's literally, I don't deserve to be here, you know, in the water. So it's a heavy thing, you know, it's not just fighting our way for our place. It's like you said with Carissa's, I mean, I can't believe that Carissa Moore, who is so beautiful and powerful and amazing, of course, I didn't even think that she should struggle with such self-image, because to me, she's, I mean, gorgeous and amazing. And I do know, I mean, I remember stories of like Silvana Lima not being able to get sponsorship because she doesn't look a certain way. There's a whole article about her some years ago. But it's more than just our sense of self, of how we look. And I guess it is partly that male gaze. It's like when that male gaze dismisses you, you internalize that you don't even deserve to exist, you know, and you're so vulnerable out there because you're so open. You're so excited. Like you're attuned with this incredible force. And then at the same time, somebody can just, you know, shit on you. I can't think of a better way to put it.
Well, I think there are sadists, and because men do have pecking orders and pick on each other, then they'll more readily pick on women because they know we tend to be smaller. We're not raised to be UFC fighters. Although one of the women in my book, Kiana Blankenfeld, does train people in that. And she's the daughter of Bill Blankenfeld, who was one of the original Black Shorts, who stood up against the Aussie invasion in the 70s. And so I think, yeah, I mean, Carissa has told me in interviews that she feels intimidated even between stops when she's home from the World Championship Tour, when she goes to her local break, Kewalo Basin, if it's all guys and just her.
Wow.
They're not going to cut her any slack just because she's 6-time world champ.
Wow.
You know, she's a girl, and the water it's a great commons. It's a leveler. There are a lot of people out there who don't know anything.
Yeah.
Don't read the paper, don't watch the TV, or at least not the women's sports parts of the surf. Not even aware of who she is. And so if that can happen, and it's internalized too. She shouldn't feel afraid. She's very, very strong. Knock on wood, she's never had to be out for an injury. But one of her best friends, Joanne Defay, the French surfer, is brunette, and doesn't wear a lot of makeup. She's not a girly girl, a real power surfer.
Oh, she's incredible. Yeah.
Plus sponsorships. You know, she's had to stay. Carissa has had put her up at surf meets because otherwise Joanne couldn't afford to go.
Wow.
So, and I've talked with like girls in my book, you know, really powerful up and coming young wahine, like the ones in the Surf Girl Hawaii Amazon Prime show. And they've said, yeah, we have a lot of fun at Rocky Point or Haleiwa in the early morning until the guys come out. Guys just feel they should own it, you know, because they have since the 50s or whenever it was when they took back surfing after Gidget made it popular, or rather Gidget's father, you know, with the movies. And then suddenly men took over surfing when it was monetized. They could wield the big boards at the time, you know, until smaller fiberglass, more maneuverable boards came in that women could use. And from the 50s until like 2019, they earned more in competitions than women. I mean, for a while, there was women's competition in the 1970s because women like Hawaii's Rel Sun, the Heart of Kaha, and the great California women, Joyce Hoffman, Lynn Boyer here in Hawaii, Patty Panizia, who then became an equal rights lawyer. They just stood up and said, okay, we're going to have our own women's world tour because the world championships were all just men. And they that happened for a while in the 70s, but then there was a backlash. Men took over the Women's World Tour, amalgamated it into their own, and women were paid from 10% to maybe 60% at the apex of what men were for a prize purse. To this day, there are twice as many men on the World Championship Tour as women. And there are maybe, I mean, it's just, there's no comparison. There's maybe like one or two girls or women's heats in amateur competitions in Hawaii versus, 6 to 8 for boys. So it's still so unequal. In 2019, the World Surf League said women would have parity of prize money, and they do, which is great. That's a huge change. But because there's still so many more men, obviously the pots are much bigger on the male side, and women just have less opportunity.
Definitely. I did just a sort of mini podcast a couple of weeks ago, right before the last women's surf WCT event, really and trying to talk to all of us about how to watch women's pro surfing, like how to watch it, and then talked about some of that, like that the fact that there's 17 women versus 34, and then the whole thing they did this last year where they put in the cut and then they cut it. They cut you halfway through the tour and they just fired or he quit, the head of the WSL that instituted all of those changes. And I understand why they're trying to appeal to a broader audience. But so now my mission and yours clearly is that, I want to appeal to all of us, men and women, to watch women surfing, because women surfing is really exciting. It's really, but like any sport, you have to get invested, and it takes some time to learn how to watch pro surfing. You have to educate yourself. You need to listen to the announcers. You have to understand what you're watching. It's always difficult because it's hard to match up the times when the contests are going on. But once you just watch a few and listen to the full heats, like listen so you can hear them talk story and learn, then you start to learn about who these surfers are, and you learn what they're up against, and you learn their statistics. And like any sport, we're bombarded with other more mainstream sports in terms of you grow up on it, their stories, why you care about this team. It's got a legacy. So it takes energy to educate ourselves in watching, in supporting, the women athletes. But I mean, I personally prefer watching women surf to men. And I mean, the men are amazing, but they're just so fast and, and they fly around and, like they're cool, but the women are so powerful and so beautiful and so progressive, and I can see my body when I watch them surf. So I'm a huge fan of it, and for the parody, for all those reasons. And how can we help convince Rip Curl and O'Neill and all of these other brands that we want to see women that look like Joanne DeFay. Like, I really want to see Joanne DeFay sponsored. I had no idea she didn't have sponsorship.
I think she does now, but there was a time when she didn't, and she made a big comeback thanks to people like Carissa helping out.
Oh, it's amazing. But I don't even know how we've started talking about it, but it is a big passion of mine to educate people about how to watch and support women surfers. But we see here, oh my gosh, there's almost no female shortboarders on the Big Island. The girls coming up, there are very few girls. I can only think of, there was a really good girl and she moved away. A couple, I don't know if they just keep their teeth in it as much. And now with it being a career opportunity, I'm sure you've got to be seeing this in Oahu with all the homeschooled kids that their parents are aiming for, professional surfing as a career. But I definitely see it on Oahu. There's girls on Oahu that's happening for. We don't have any on this side of the island. There was someone on Hilo at this point. There's a couple girls that they probably could if they wanted to really push it, but we're not seeing really any girls coming up through the contest right now here.
Well, there's just not the level of encouragement. There are many of the girls right now on the World Championship Tour were homeschooled, or are homeschooled. Betty Lou Sakura Johnson, they left high school to be homeschooled so they could go on the tour. Their parents have made an incredible commitment.
Yeah.
Gabrielle O'Brien, I think, was homeschooled. She's a Kauai native, like Malia Manuel. I think professional surfing is, well, of course, we have every right to watch it. I mean, Title IX is how old? Like 50 years old or something. You know,
Who?
Title IX.
Oh, Title
IX.
IX. Yeah, Title IX. Sorry, you cut
Involving
out for a
women's
minute.
sports and
Yeah.
education.
Mm-hmm.
But there still aren't many opportunities in schools, in public schools in Hawaii. Even Punahou, very rich private schools don't have surf teams. They have clubs.
Yeah.
So a lot of it is economically based, like with a lot of sports. Do the parents have the resources to pay for travel?
It's so, yeah, when you start to hear
All
how
of that,
expensive it is.
I think there just we have every right to enjoy seeing women surf just because we can see ourselves, Sheila. You and I can see ourselves in it, and that affirms us. And we're learning because we know, how those bodies work and how our bodies work. It's really very important. It's essential.
Mm-hmm. And it's so fun.
I've had so many men tell me, men of my generation, like from the 60s and 70s when we're all pressing for peace, love, and social change, tell me, well, I just think it's so uninteresting watching the women, men are just better. And then finally, 6 women finally surf in the Eddie Aikau in January, and arguably some said the biggest and best waves there have ever been in an Eddie Aikau on their bay. And there's, I mean, even a lot of the women like, Keala Kennelly, Makani Adric, they were Emmy Erickson, Andrea Muller, and the wonderful Justine DuPont. And who was the 6th one? Oh, shucks. But anyway, they were hesitated at first because they had never surfed competitively against men in the same heat. At the Eddie Aikau at Waimea Bay, there's been the Red Bull where you're surfing, you're being filmed. This is founded by Bonsai Betty DiPolito. Red Bull is a great sponsor. Yeah. And so they're surfing in a free surfing day. They're having to deal with men, but they have a camera crew, they have life support, they have great equipment. But this is they head to head with the men. And I saw Emmy Erickson at the Surf Film Festival here in Honolulu the other day, and she was like, "Now I think they should have really a women's heat in the Eddy. Why not? It's not like it's not like women want to surf and win against men. We want to surf to the best of our ability."
Yeah.
Powering it against men doesn't really necessarily do it, but they did it. They held back and they got the lay of the land. They're like, okay, we're going. And they all went. They didn't score really high, but it was the first time ever. It was so beautiful. Look how fast it caught up at Pipeline, right? Finally, the first championship tour ever events at Pipeline for women were like in 2022.
Right.
Okay.
Amazing. And then the women finally get a chance to surf. I mean, that has been the thing that they've all talked about. You listen to Tyler Wright, these power surfers that say, we just haven't had the opportunity to surf out there. And for all the reasons we're talking about. And very few men get to too. Like, it's not, I'm not saying that like all men get to surf pipe, it just hasn't been happening, like, except for Moana. And a few other women, Carissa, other people who have surfed it consistently. And same with Teopo'o. Now, oh my God, I saw Moana on a wave from there. And oh gosh, what's Tatiana Weston Webb charging Teopo'o?
Yeah.
So as women are getting a chance, but no, it's never going to be the same. But I guess, I fell prey to that same thinking that it wasn't as exciting to watch women. I said it in all athletics because they weren't, quote, as good as men. But it wasn't until I started really watching it that I was like, that's not really the way you measure it. Like, it's not better. It's different. It's just different.
Exactly.
It just really is a different sport. Like volleyball, men's volleyball, you can't even see the ball. Like, it's just like, you literally can't see it. They're so powerful. Women's volleyball is a totally different sport, but they're all amazing.
Well, look how women's soccer right now is repopularizing the sport.
Yeah.
Interested in men's soccer because it was just so tedious and, violent and repetitive. Women play really creatively. I mean, it's getting huge audience. And I think really gender equity, as gender equity progresses in surfing, it's going to help everybody including the men who feel picked on. It's just a sense of humanizing
Yeah.
the
It is humanizing. I think that's really the important thing is humanizing the lineup. And it's not about taking away people's excellence and what they've earned. It's just coming at it from a very different perspective. And I do listen, since I watch I watch the WCT, and I always have to watch it on stupid, because the WSL app never works for me on my computer. So if I watch it on the computer, I always have to watch it on YouTube or Facebook. And in which case, I get all the comments of all the guys as they're watching women's sports, scrolling down. And most of them they're just idiots anyways. They burn the guys too. Like they're just those guys. But I do see the ones popping up going, wow, Tati rips, or, yeah, go Tyler, or whatever. Like there really are a lot of men who also are celebrating, like Moana's husband, like that. It's exciting, it's just, it's incredible to watch excellence, I want to ask you, there's a quote you have in here that has to do, I want to hear a little bit more about your career, because you've had a pretty amazing career, just your journey. So you had said, your quote is, surfing with all its public setbacks, humiliations, and gravity-defying triumphs toughened me up, making me more persistent in striving for my goals and less concerned about what people thought. It helped me be more competitive in academics, speak up in class, and win leadership positions in student government and publications. I think we've already heard a little bit about this, barking down the predator. I mean, I would say you're pretty wily too, or you just think on your feet. You're thinking through and then connected to your intuition. But, you did leave surfing. So I guess it's a dual question. How did this shape the career that you built? And also, how did you incorporate surfing all that time?
What an interesting question. By the way, the sixth woman, how could I forget, in the Ediacara was, of course, Paige Alms.
Oh, my gosh. Oh, I'm so glad you said that. I was going to look that up.
Yeah, who won the first Jaws championship for women in 2016. But yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I pretty much had to leave surfing because, well, I'm just not naturally athletic. I mean, I'm super energetic, and I was trained as a dancer. A modern dancer my whole life. So
okay.
Yeah. But I wasn't really good at dancing either. I'm mostly just sort of a brain in a jar, really. That's a bookish girl, always reading books. Married a guy like that, but he is from Southern California, and he's a great body surfer. Okay. So it's kind of like, I guess, Moana's husband. But we fell in love in Iowa, where there wasn't a wave in sight at the writer's workshop. But yeah, I think I say in the book, when I went away to school, I went to Northern California, to Stanford, because it seemed near enough to the coast. Mm-hmm. And then I realized the water was like freezing cold, and there were sharks and elephant seals where the Stanford Surf Club went. So I just quit, started hiking. And I do think, in a sense, my grandfather was right in that I don't think it's possible to be a kick-ass surfer and a kick-ass academic, at least not at that time. So I did need to separate from surfing, and I always surfed obsessively when I came home, but I came home less and less. You have a kid, there's school, you have a full-time job. We lived in Manhattan for most of our professional lives, and we didn't have a car. So sometimes we'd hitch a ride with William Finnegan, the wonderful author of Barbarian Days.
Oh, okay.
He's a college classmate of my husband. It's Don Wallace.
Oh, wow.
So he'd take us out to the Hamptons. His family had a house at Sag Harbor for a while. We'd surf a little, but I just seemed to lose it. Then finally we started going to this little island off France, because I'd studied there at Stanford abroad, in Tours, France. And one of my teachers was from this island called Belle-Île-en-Mer. And we discovered that there was actually surf there, and there weren't any surfers. This was like back in the 80s. I borrowed a surfboard from like this girl who her dad ran the service station. They had the only surfboard on the island. and I took it out and it was really good. It was like a bay break, 2 points, sand, kind of a beach break, but it got deep depending on the tides. And that kind of, my love of surfing and my abilities were reborn in France, where there was really no one to bother me.
Wow.
Just only one board and two girls. And then this one guy, this young kid on a red board who was a phenomenon. I still know him. But that's how it reawakened, really. Because, surfing with William Finnegan, he was really good.
Yeah.
He always took time to travel around the world and surf, but I'm more of a homebody, just in the city and trying to lead the literary life.
Well, I think you were leading the literary life. I mean, you seem to have accomplished that pretty well. What was your most memorable writing part of your literary career?
I don't know. It's hard. Maybe a story I had in the Atlantic many, many years ago about a young actor in London whose mother is dying of cancer and he's taking care of her. Had nothing to do with surfing. I started really writing about surfing once we moved home. And I got this job, which morphed into doing the occasional surf column. I'm so grateful to the Honolulu Star-Advertiser. I had a great editor. She's like, it's really interesting. I guess she grew up paddling for the Outrigger Canoe Club. And she said, it'd be really good to have more of the life offshore in a column.
I like the voice. Life offshore in the column. Yeah. I didn't even know there was a column until once I got, and I don't get the Star-Advertiser. Are you still doing the column?
I am. I left the paper full time. I quit in May 2022. But then the sports editor asked me to write a monthly column on surfing.
Oh, okay.
So I do that. I do the occasional freelance sports article. One thing when you're talking of, I just wanted to say that Betty DiPolito and Kayla Kennelly have praised the book. And Kayla said there's a really in-depth look at women surfing and she loves all the photos. And Betty said she loves it because it portrays regular women like ourselves, although she's a past champion, of course. But, it portrays regular women, recreational surfers. And that was really important to me, that it not just be about the champions, but that we're all kind of champions in our own dramas out there trying to survive.
Absolutely. That's so true. And it's really cool that they called that out, because it is, you can find yourself no matter what color you are, what background you are, what age you are, you can find yourself in this book. And, you just feel so many of the stories. I love that. We are all champions and queens and warriors and failures and everything, in one moment, often in one session. But with this powerful love of the ocean, really.
And if we want to criticize ourselves, it should come from within us. We're trying to improve at our surfing. We don't have to listen to some guy telling us we can't do it. We can criticize ourselves, but we have to have self-determination, which the Hawaiians were also robbed of because of the illegal American overthrow of their monarchy and the illegal annexation of Hawaii as a territory. Men have kind of illegally annexed the waves. And here we are wanting to reassert our sovereignty, which we deserve according to Hawaiian culture.
Right. I like it. So with that, I'm going to ask you just a couple surfing questions then. So I'm sure you have so many, but give me one favorite moment in the surf.
I guess it was just when you said, it's nice to be recognized by people. So one day I got this bomb out at Sui's going backside left. And then I was just cruising along and I never planned anything, but I guess the time was just right. And so I got shacked. I got barreled, and I came out and I was like, did that really happen? And this woman was paddling out and she said, hey, you just got barreled. And I was so happy. And she affirmed it because I'm kind of clueless. I'm just so excited to be in the ocean that I don't really understand what's necessarily going on. So that was a really nice moment.
I've never been barreled. That's really cool. I love that.
You didn't notice because it's not like in the surf movies, there just might be a little shade. or suddenly things go quiet. Anyway, that was nice. But I think one of my favorite moments out surfing was with my sister-in-law, who she died of cancer many years ago, maybe 15 years ago. And she brought me back to surfing in Southern California when I married my husband. We really surfed together a lot. And I remember the two of us went out at Huntington Beach, where she had been accosted and beaten up by men. And I write about this in the book. But it was a really big day. It was super scary. Really big black tubes, shore break at Huntington. And I just remember seeing her. We were talking about how afraid we were and stuff. She was a natural athlete. She was a champion golfer.
Mm-hmm.
And I just saw her like totally on this big black face, like triple overhead, screaming for it. And that was one of my favorite surfing moments.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
Still at the time, but she still, could go for it. And I just praised the heck out of her.
It's really cool that is one of your favorite surfing moments. I can see it myself.
Of course you can. And that's why we love to watch other women surf professionally. They're surfing for us.
Yeah, it is true. I think you're right. That's why it's so much fun to watch women surf, is like, I can feel it.
Exactly.
And especially women that surf the way I wish I surfed, then yeah, it's really,
and you can learn.
I'm hoping, one thing I want to say to anyone that wonders, we can get better. We can get better in our 50s. We can get better in our 60s. We can get better. So it's, it's slow going. But suddenly, like today, I had this little session and suddenly I was just sinking my rail on my takeoff just in a different way. And it just accelerated me. And I was like, oh my gosh, I have all this speed. Like, and I don't know what I did. I felt like it was just from watching people, and just suddenly it just hit it right the first time, because me getting my feet in the right place at the right time, it's rare. So for it to actually happen all together, but I really felt it. I'm like, oh my gosh. And then every wave after that, I don't know how it'll be tomorrow, but I had that experience. It was like something happened, So, okay, the last thing I'm going to ask you, because I could ask you more, but I guess we're at 90 minutes. Maybe we should wrap up. Now I have to ask you two questions. What is the favorite part? What do you like most about your surfing? What are you working on? I'm going to, what is the thing that you really hope to achieve? Or do you have something?
Oh, there's always stuff I hope to achieve. I want to actually improve my frontside surfing because I tend to do better backside, like with that barrel, because I can't see how gnarly the wave is, right?
Wait, are you on a shortboard or longboard, mid-size? What do you surf?
My basic board is a 6'10" thruster.
Okay. So it's a shortboard. Okay.
I guess so, yeah. And but I feel more cowardly, taking off on a really fast hollow right. But those had really been like at rice bowls when I was a kid. And I'd like to get back to that feeling, that agility and that blind courage of a kid. But of course, a lot of it's based on ignorance of mortality.
Yeah. So, that is so true.
But just paddling into the jaws of the wave, I keep practicing that. And I get flung a lot. But it's interesting when you make one of those really fast waves, like taking off under the lip, just dropping in. That's the best feeling, eyes wide open, face to face with the wave. So that's what I work for. And also just turning around and taking off on a big bomb, because I'm very timid and I'll miss a lot of them and I should have gone. But usually by the end, I'm mostly a summer surfer in South Shore. By the end of the summer, I'm able to do it. When kids go back to school and tourists go back to wherever.
Okay. And then what is your favorite thing about your surfing?
Oh, so my favorite thing is my ability. I don't want to brag, but I must be the modern dance. My ability to make almost any drop.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, like no matter how sheer, if I can catch the wave, I can make the drop.
That's amazing.
But it's really weird because like, especially in a big wave, you see the nose of the board and you're like, I just relaxed. And, guys had really been blown away by it.
Oh, I want to see. All right, I'm coming over. I
Nothing
want to
great
see.
about it. It's just
No, because
something
it's a thing that it's
I
the
trademark.
hardest thing for me. It's the hardest thing for me. So that's So I just want to cheer you because I think that's amazing. Okay, last question. And you've really kind of answered this in so many ways, but just in case you have one pearl of wisdom that you want to convey, what is one thing that you want women surfers to know?
I want women surfers to know that our place is in the waves and that the motto of the book is surfing well with a smile is the best revenge.
Oh, I love it. Oh my gosh, I love it. Well, Mindy, thank you so much for joining me. And I will put the notes, surfing, Sisterhood Hawaii. Everybody just go buy it. I'll put a link in the show notes and definitely with every post that I make. It's just should be on your coffee table so you can pick it up. And the pictures are so beautiful. Oh, who did the photography? I think you have photo credit all the way through.
We do. One of my colleagues from the Star-Advertiser, Dennis Oda, did a lifetime surf shoot for the book. So that's where we have all the girls at Sui's and, women of all ages. And that was really important because I wanted to show mediocre surf and how much fun women have in it.
That's so important. Yeah.
There's so many great photographers who gave permission to use their work, like Don King and Leroy Grannis's family. It's just, we have many different photos, but I want to give a shout out to Krista Funk. Krista Funk body surfs Waimea Bay. She was shooting the Eddy the whole time. And I recently got to work with her on an assignment for a magazine. So she shot a couple of the pictures in the book she let us use for a reasonable rate, but she's one of my major heroes.
Yeah, the pictures are so beautiful. And you're right, exactly, because a lot of them they're just women surfing. They're just women in all those conditions. So anyways,
Kennelly and Rochelle Ballard and Betty DiPolito, a lot of women gave me permission to use really radical big wave tubular surfing, which was great. But it's got a wide variety.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks so much for joining. And it was really awesome talking with you. I'm so excited.
I am too. Thanks for all the research you do, Sheila.
Oh, sure.